shall I love thee, Lord my God, with every breath I breathe? How shall I love thee, Lord my God, with every breath I breathe? Just as a fire may burn a whole forest, burn to the root my desire. Just as a fire may burn a whole forest, burn to the root my desire. How shall I seek thee, Lord my God, with every breath I breathe? How shall I seek thee, Lord my God, with every breath I breathe? Just as a fire may burn a whole forest, burn to the root my desire. Just as a fire may burn a whole forest, burn to the root my desire. How shall I serve thee, Lord my God, with every breath I breathe? How shall I serve thee, Lord my God, with every breath I breathe? Just as a fire may burn a whole forest, burn to the root my desire. Just as a fire may burn a whole forest, burn to the root my desire. How shall I worship thee, Lord my God, with every breath I breathe? How shall I worship thee, Lord my God, with every breath I breathe? Just as a fire may burn a whole forest, burn to the root my desire. Just as a fire may burn a whole forest, burn to the root my desire. How shall I love thee, Lord my God, with every breath I breathe? How shall I love thee, Lord my God, with every breath I breathe? Just as a fire may burn a whole forest, burn to the root my desire. Just as a fire may burn a whole forest, burn to the root my desire. Just as a fire may burn a whole forest, burn to the root my desire. How shall I love thee, Lord my God, with every breath I breathe? How shall I love thee, Lord my God, with every breath I breathe?
Another stanza of Swamiji's that actually Asha wrote the words in English for. You fill my heart with music. I dance through life with thee. I sing your song in sorrow's gone. In joy I live ever free. So it was initially written by Swamiji in Italian, and Asha wrote the words in
I sing your song in sorrow's song. with music, I dance to life with thee. I sing your song in sorrow's song, in joy I live ever free. I sing your song in sorrow's song, in joy I live ever free. I sing your song in sorrow's song, in joy I live ever
Second, there she's going to sing one of Swami's, one of his very beautiful, heartfelt songs.
Too many lives have drunk the cup of laughter. No man could tell the pleasures I have known. The stars in the endless sky, if one could count, would come to this. Yet as vast as are their numbers, so many years I wandered far from you. Through many lives I've drunk the cup of sorrow. No man could tell the bitter tears I've shed. The drops in the endless sea, if one could count, would come to this. Yet as vast as are their numbers, so many years I wandered far from you. Through countless lives I've sought your cup of sweetness, found other cups, but thirsted evermore. The streams in the hills of time all found their way into a desert. Every moon of bright fulfillment, ere many eyes that sink to evening blue. Every moon of bright fulfillment, ere many eyes that sink to evening blue. I long for you in summer and in winter, only for you my heart will stay now. I've known that sweetest songs, ears ever heard, where but your echo. Lord, at last, fill me completely, for never I'd wander far from you. Lord, at last, fill me completely, for never I'd wander far from
Let's take a few minutes of silence. Just centering ourselves deeply where we are, to unite our spirits in the experience of being together for the next few hours. Open heart and mind, with higher wisdom and greater love, so that we may collectively draw to ourselves and individually receive whatever divine grace is waiting there for us now. Good evening all. Very nice to see you. Some are familiar faces, some are new. It's nice to see you. Some of us have been talking for much of today. We'd be called tonight part 2. But in as much as many of you haven't heard part 1, we'll just sort of stay wherever we are. I don't usually speak from a prepared script, so whatever it turns out to be is what it is. As you probably know, my name is Asha. My title is Naya Swami, which is the same as Swami, except that our founder of our spiritual organization created a new Swami order. That's what the word Naya means. That's why we're dressed in blue instead of orange. And I'm here representing not myself, but these line of masters, and especially Swami Priyananda. Just a little bit of my own story. I've been following the path of Kriya Yoga since I was 22 and have pretty much done nothing else of note in my life except this, but it's been more than enough. I live in Northern California with my husband David, and we together have developed the Ananda community in the Palo Alto area. We've been living there for about more than 25 years. Prior to that, I was a founding member of the Ananda community in country up in Grass Valley. So I've had the pleasure in my life of helping to start 2 of Ananda's communities, and I actually thought I would end up starting a lot more, but once we got to Palo Alto, we just kind of got stuck and never got done. In more recent years, just before Swami passed, a year before he died, he asked me to consider the whole world my community. So even though he didn't change my address, as I put it, because my husband is still engaged there and that's where I live, he wanted me to spread my wings a little and to travel about a little more and just share the teachings of Yogananda and the understanding of the spiritual life that has been developed through Ananda. The uniqueness of what Ananda has developed is not only relationship to the masters, but there are many who followed this line of masters. But our particular contribution has been community, and how that translates is not just a question of a few people living in a cooperative way, but what that means is from the very beginning of the development of Ananda, we have had to think about it in terms of a completely integrated lifestyle. Because we started out on a lot of land with a big mortgage, we didn't have shelter for the winter, we didn't have businesses to support ourselves, When people started having children, we didn't have any way to educate the children. When our parents started getting old, we didn't have any way to take care of them. I mean, everything was engaged with life. And so we had to try to live a serious spiritual life without the luxury of being able to shed all the other responsibilities. The tradition of spirituality until, the last generation or two has always been, I turn away from the world, I go up into the Himalayan cave, I become a monk or a nun somewhere, and I just shed this whole story and I never have to think about it again. For some people that would be horrible. For others, it's really attractive. Just depends on how you're oriented toward that. When my husband and I were on our honeymoon, he doesn't have much relationship to that kind of renunciation. I have a great relationship with it. I used to say that if you tossed him up in the air and just let him land in his natural spot, he'd probably land in the Taj Mahal. If you threw me up in the air and let me land in my natural spot, I would be in some little black little cell somewhere, with a iron bedstead and a rock from a pillow. But still, we've managed. But everybody has different orientations, and such things are, relatively speaking, superficial. But in our present age and our present time, we find ourselves, set in motion by this wonderful guru, Paramhansa Yogananda, who, of all the places in the entire world, chose your city and decided it was the place from which to launch a spiritual revolution. And that spiritual revolution of self-realization is what is my spiritual legacy. It's the responsibility that I'm heir to. Swami Kriyananda, as many of you know, passed away. Passed away is such an odd word, isn't it? I never know exactly what to say. The word died is so flat, it doesn't really do him justice. Merged into the infinite. He threw off the mortal coil. Dropped the body. Yeah, dumped the body, as Yogananda says in one of his poems. But he became more difficult to call on the phone. I stopped using email on the 21st of April, 2013, which was quite recent. And especially ever since he's been gone, those of us who were trained by him have felt an ever-increasing responsibility to just talk to people about what's possible. And our topic tonight is self-realization, which is just about as solidly in the center of everything that Yogananda taught, everything that I've dedicated my life to, everything that I feel is important to share. And I'm not sharing it from the point of view of making any effort to persuade you or to convert you or anything like that. Swamiji often said he never wanted to convert anyone to anything except your own true nature. And in many ways, I was speaking of a little bit earlier, Yogananda was a Bengali who came from Calcutta, who came to America in 1920. I mean, now it's almost 100 years later, not quite, but close to 100 years later. The world that Yogananda walked into in America was a completely different world than the world that we're living in now. It was a time of when America was just sort of flourishing, and the traditional society was very much intact. The 60s had not hit yet. And that was the beginning of blowing the story to bits. That people still went to church and everything was still very much in an orderly fashion. But nonetheless, he came to this country and his intention was to make a revolution. All by himself. Just one man. And he was in his 20s. And he was an extremely powerful and vigorous person. He was the first Indian yogi to make America his home. He was not the first yogi to ever touch the shores of America. Swami Ramatirtha came earlier, Swami Vivekananda came, but neither of them stayed very long. A few years was about all they could do, and then they went back to their own country. But Yogananda was born for something completely different. He was born to bring about the revolution that we're all living now, truly. Even a lot of what happened in the 60s, odd as it may seem, was the result of the influence of these great masters. In Autobiography of a Yogi, which probably most of you have read, if you haven't, you must. It's just as simple as that. It's really a revolutionary book. But in part of it, Yogananda talks about the fact that these two masters, Jesus, of course, is recognizable, and Babaji is a deathless master living still in the Himalayas. That's over here, and it's not a photograph, it's a drawing of him. And Yogananda writes in Autobiography of a Yogi that these two masters, one responsible for the East and one responsible for the West, Jesus for the West, Babaji for the East, are very concerned about the direction of modern society. Now, I speak of Autobiography of the Yogi from the premise of believing everything that Yogananda says, so I'm just going to present it. I have no way of judging the veracity of it except my own experience of many years of his consciousness. But he said they're very concerned about the direction of modern society, of suicidal wars, of religious intolerance, of racial prejudice, and what he called the boomerang effects of too much materialism. And they were very concerned about the fact that we have developed the technology to blow ourselves to bits, and we haven't developed the moral strength not to do it, which pretty much sums it up. That this is a very, very rapidly changing and deeply insecure period of time. And it's some comfort, to me at least, to think that the great masters who are really in charge of this planet know what's going on here. And they're thinking about it. Swami Kriyananda, at the end of his autobiography, which is called The New Path, he writes there about the fact that this world is not really run by nations and governments, that politicians are themselves servants of greater cosmic forces, whether they realize that or not. Yogananda himself made some astonishing statements about his involvement in modern politics. He actually said that it was he himself who put the thought into President Truman's mind to go to war in Korea and draw a line over which the communists couldn't cross. And he said that he did that because the communism, from his point of view, Yogananda's point of view, because it was atheistic and completely materialistic and did not believe or respect the integrity and the importance of each individual soul. And for that reason, he saw it as the great enemy of true values, and he felt that the incursion of that philosophy had to be stopped. So he sent, he said, President Truman to war there. He also said in another context that when Hitler whose success seemed nobody could stop Hitler, but inexplicably, toward the end of the Second World War, Hitler divided his forces and opened a second front in Russia. And as a consequence, he did not have the military power to continue as he had done, and he was defeated because of it. It was inconsistent with the decisions that he had made up until that point. And Master said it was the masters in India, in the Himalayas, who put the thought into Hitler's mind to divide his forces. He was blinded for a moment because his force was too strong and the power of good needed to be supported. Now, one can say that these are far out ideas, or one can very comfortably just think that this is how things operate. Swamiji writes in the Path that far more than any of us realize, the direction of our whole planet and our whole society is being guided by souls wiser than us who have been given the divine responsibility for seeing us through. Every country has its guardian angels, every city, every culture. There's everything we see in this world has counterparts on higher dimensions, and those higher dimensions are always active here. In Autobiography of a Yogi, Yogananda makes another statement, which is really astonishing when you contemplate it. He says, our thoughts are not individually created, but we merely tune in to vibrations that exist in the atmosphere, and then we become an instrument for whatever level of consciousness we are in tune with. This is the metaphysical version of the devil made me do it. which actually has more truth to it than you may realize. Now think about it for a minute. You know, you can be with someone, both of you can go to a beautiful park for a day, or a lovely concert, or a marvelous restaurant. If one person is decided to be depressed and unhappy and crabby about what's going on, you can have exactly the same experiences. But if you're tuning into two different vibrations of reality, the external experiences, the internal experiences will be unaffected by the external. I mean, you can choose whether you're going to enjoy or whether you're not going to enjoy. If you've ever been with somebody who's determined to be unhappy, I'm sure that you know once you decide to be unhappy, isn't it so that you can just find so many good reasons why you should be unhappy? It's not hard. When you look around the world, you can just start pretty much anywhere, and you can find a whole lot of reasons to be depressed. And if you become attuned in that direction, then that becomes who you are. And if one does that habitually, that's who you get to be habitually. Or if you decide to be optimistic and cheerful, reason follows feeling, and you will get on the strata of consciousness in which there are always good reasons for optimism and good cheer. Yogananda went so far as to say that all conditions in life are neutral.
Yes.
And how we experience them depends entirely on the predisposition of our own consciousness, whether we're going to experience them as happy or whether we're going to experience them as sad. Now, when Yogananda came to America, he had to start talking in 1920 to Americans at a time when the whole world was just a different planet. You know, no email, no computers, no walking on the moon, no a zillion things that we just take for granted. There was radio and television and electricity and running water. It wasn't that long ago. But nonetheless, he had to start explaining to people about his inner reality, which was really the dominant concern of really thinking and caring people. And when he talks about Jesus and Babaji together planning the salvation of this age, what he goes on to explain is the salvation of this age is for individual people to experience within themselves their own connection to an infinite divine source. And having once experienced it within ourselves, to now look at one another and realize that that same divinity is inherent in everyone. Once that thought is there, technology is playing a role in this. I was in New Delhi at the time that the United States was involved, for some reason, in bombing Yugoslavia. I'm not really so sharp about current events because they don't feel so current to me. They just go on in a certain way. But we were bombing Yugoslavia for some reason. And I recall hearing about a child, a teenager in Yugoslavia who was on email with her teenage friend in America. The American's friend was piloting one of those planes. And the girl in Yugoslavia is hearing the bombs fall, and they're talking to each other in real time. Now, you just start there, and it gets harder and harder to carry this out. I was also, the reason I mentioned New Delhi is because a friend of ours there has a position in the New Delhi airport, where he is responsible to ensure the safety of every plane. The plane can't take off until he assures the safety of it. So at the time that this was happening, he was up in the air in a certain aircraft. And the flight pattern of his aircraft was at a certain strata. And the flight pattern of the American bombers was at a higher strata, either higher or lower, but probably lower because he could see it. And he watched the planes go with the bombs like this, and then they dropped their load of bombs, and then they came back empty like this. And this conversation is taking place in the living room in New Delhi, and there were 7 different countries represented in that room. And we're talking. There were no Yugoslavians or Croatians in the room at that time. We were Americans and British and German, and I'm not sure who else was there. We're just talking about this, and we all made a pact we decided that no matter what our passports say on them, we are the nation of self-realization. And that this is the unifying reality. That we understand from inside ourselves what our true reality is, and this must be the future. You know, before technology and all of this communication was possible, it was very easy to say that the Japanese were evil, or the Chinese were of another race, or the black people of Africa are nothing like us, or whatever you could say, because people couldn't be there, they couldn't know. And now people can travel everywhere and come everywhere. Where I live in the Silicon Valley, and it's just the same looking at this room tonight, there's no dominant language or culture where I live. There's 1/3 native speakers of Spanish, 1/3 people that you would call Asian of every description, Japanese, Indian, everything. And then 1/3 of the rest of us, which includes people who are black or white or whatever colors we might be, but didn't actually import ourselves from some other country. And you walk around the area and you hear every language. And the white people, so to speak, include the Russians, of whom there are a large number. It's just, everybody's all mixed up. I was talking to one of my friends who lives there too, and the couples are more likely to be of 2 ethnicities than they are to be of just one. It's just the way the world is happening. But that is a symptom of something that's far more important. And what's far more important is this dawning realization, who am I? Really in my essence, not just what did my parents name me and what's on my driver's license or something like that, but really who am I? What do I want to identify with? You know, when I live my life, what do I want to call myself? And there's a certain enthusiasm these days for calling ourselves world citizens in the global village and all of these words, which are really terrific. But unless we back that up with an actual change in perception, where it's not merely a nice idea not to have these divisions, but it becomes impossible to have them. Just impossible, because we have friends, we have relatives, we have children, and we know ourselves and know who we are. And this is the message and the purpose why Yogananda came all the way from India to America, which is the one country where he could really do it. Because I didn't have a passport until I was in my mid-30s. I just lived in America and California. I didn't even hardly travel in this country. I just had a very small life. Then I married my husband, David Praver, who at that time was a really big traveler, and immediately he's taken me all over the place. But the first time I went out of the country, I went to Italy and to Europe. That was my first trip, and then later I went to India. And when I got there, it was so interesting to me. First we were in Florence, and all of these Florentines were very proud of the fact that Michelangelo had lived in their city, and that Leonardo da Vinci was from Florence. And I was sort of looking at these people thinking, what does that have to do with you? You know? And then later I went to India, and India is very, very proud of its ancient traditions and all the Vedas and the rituals and the rishis and everything that you can say. And at the same time, I'm looking at some modern Indian person and I'm thinking, what does that have to do with you? You know, you're incarnated here right now. You don't have any glory just because they had glory. You're just here right now. And I realized, which I had never known, because if you only live in America, you think like an American. We have no history in this country. You know, proudly in business since 1995. And the only thing that was here, which was something really worth respecting, we destroyed as soon as we got here. So the only orientation we have as a culture is what we can make as we go forward. Now, of course, that makes us crass, according to older civilizations, in certain ways, and we lack a certain classical power, you might say, or appreciation of many things. But for the purposes of self-realization, it was absolutely tailor-made. In fact, the way Yogananda put it, he says, in India, they know it's difficult to find God. So he suggests to them that they should find God or try hard to devote their life to self-realization. they'll say, oh, but it's so difficult. Many lifetimes, but my karma, this is the way, but my karma. Like that, the word karma is always said in sort of a downward moving energy, but my karma. Maybe some lifetime I'll be able to do it. Master said, as I call him, Master said when he came to America, he said to people, we can realize God. And they said, sure, why not? We've done everything else, we can do this too. And our ignorance served us blissfully well.
Yes.
Plus, it was a total blank slate for this kind of teaching. It came out of India because in India it's just so weighted down with centuries and centuries and centuries of tradition. I've traveled a lot in India and I've done a lot of teaching of this path in India, which took me a little while to sort of get my feet. And I still, get the objection. Well, as the ancient sage says, it's so-and-so time, and then we're off and running with some, what does that have to do with anything? And it was very difficult to establish a whole new thought form when the thought form was already so old. So he just came to America where we knew nothing, absolutely nothing, and he could say anything to us, really anything at all. And we just said, yeah, that sounds great. He wrote Autobiography of a Yogi. He tells us on page 9 that Lahiri Mahashaya materializes in a wheat field and blesses his disciple. He tells us about yogis who can make perfume out of their hands and tame tigers with their energy, and about the deathless master Babaji and all this. And we say, wow, that's just terrific. And there's this marvelous sense of possibility. And what he started is not just for Americans by any means, because it's circling the globe, but it is uniquely set for the mindset of this country and for the power, and this is the positive power. Americans come into a lot of criticism around the world, but we have this positive power that believes that the individual has the power. I can do it. We're not bound by caste, we're not bound by class, we're really not bound by ethnicity. Immigrants come, and in a very short period of time, they're where they need to be. Of course, it's not a perfect society, but we believe in our own power to make our own destiny. And that is what self-realization is, simply. It's the tools to be able to do that. And it's not for everyone, because not everyone cares. Not everyone really is interested in finding a way to live that can be uniquely your own, and that puts you not in the passive position, but in the position of choosing your own reality. And this is where Yogananda's statement that thoughts are not individually generated, but are universal, and that we merely tune into them. And the whole path of self-realization is asking one question: what do you want to be a channel for? What do you want to tune into? What do you want to be expressing? Because at all times we are influenced. Nobody lives independent of influence. I've thought about this in the world of fashion. Now I'm a Nayaswami and I wear this essentially all the time. Before this, for the 30 years before that, when I was a public figure, I had to look enough like a woman who knew that she was a woman, so that people would not just discount me as nothing. So I had to think about what I looked like and what my hair was doing, and all of those different things. All the women in the room know exactly what I'm talking about. When I was 15 years old, which was much earlier than that, and the beatniks were just starting. I later got into the hippie flow, but I sort of started with the beatniks a little bit. I realized that, I couldn't dress out of fashion even if I wanted to. Somebody somewhere was telling me what I was supposed to look like. And wherever I went, and what would get me every time, still gets me. When the fashions first come out, they're ugly. You can always tell at the beginning that they're ugly. But then time passes. When the big black shoes came out, I don't know how long ago it was, the big black shoes, women started wearing these big black shoes. I knew they were ugly. And then about a year afterwards, I'm shopping with someone and I pick up a big black shoe and I actually say, this is cute. You want to try it on? And then just with horror, like, how did I decide that that was attractive? This is the thought form. There. And that's the smallest thing. That's the smallest thing. The thought form that you're a man or a woman. Where does that come from? Because I've lived in this body a long time and everybody looks at you. As they say, gender is the first thing people notice and the last thing they forget. And we think about it ourselves. We just walk around in this body and all of the accompaniments of this, or this age, the physical age, chronological age, just so many different factors and thousands of other attitudes that we don't even know that we have. I grew up in an intellectual Jewish family. My brother was a brilliant man, and he was on the debate team, and I was born in Texas. He was the Texas state debating champion for 2 years in a row. I mean, there's a lot of force. Texas is not New England or California, but Texas was solid, and he was solid. At our family dinner table, we never conversed, ever. We never had conversation, we only had debate. I thought until, and I'm embarrassed to say, until I was 50 years old, that debate was conversation. The difference is this: in debate, you take turns, you listen intently, you wait eagerly for your turn, and then you take all your best arguments and you say them with all the strength you have. Now, my husband, it took him quite a long time to explain to me, that's a conversation stopper, not an opener. Right? I just waited for the people around me to take their turn and present their best arguments like that. I didn't really understand that you could encourage. That you would wait quietly while they got their ideas together. And one day, it crossed my mind, that this was not a winning strategy, somehow or another. Where did I get that idea? I grew up there. It was natural to me. There's 1,000 things like that. Self-realization is the opposite. Self-realization is the individual personal decision. Who am I? What are my values? What do I choose to be influenced by? And as I said a moment ago, what do I want to be a channel for? Because we're not separate in this world. We're always projecting something or another. And it's not just a question of what you say or how you look. It's a question of the whole vibration that you're carrying. In our community, I had to mediate between these two women. It's the funniest. It was funny to me. It was not funny to them. One woman has a very critical and judgmental mind. And she really didn't like this other woman. Even in communities, people are not saints when they arrive, and we have to work these things out. This other woman was very sensitive, and so the one woman is in the kitchen cooking. This other girl walks in, the one who's very judgmental, and as soon as she sees the one who's cooking, a whole lot of negative thoughts just go through her mind. But she smiles and says, "Hello." The girl who's cooking blows up. Orders her out of the kitchen. There's just this whole scene. And the one who only said hello is so self-righteous about how she was attacked, how unfair this was, how this merely proves what a terrible person this other girl is. And finally, when I chilled her down enough, I said, "What were you thinking when you walked in?" "Well, I was thinking how unpleasant this gal is and how much I dislike her." I said, "You think that she didn't know that? What were you being a channel for?" "You were being a channel for insulting, demeaning energy, and the girl was smart enough to say, 'Get out of my kitchen.'" All the time we're walking around on this planet. What are we doing? I worked at the beginning of my spiritual life, the first few years. When I was in my 20s and Ananda was just starting, I became Swami Kriyananda's secretary for 5 or 6 years in there. And during that time, he was pretty much single-handedly the whole story. The rest of us were just awkward children, even though we were in our 20s, just sort of stumbling around trying to figure out what the heck we were doing. And he was giving all the classes and all the teaching and all the counseling. And on Sunday afternoons, after he would give Sunday service up at the meditation retreat where we all lived, he had his dome there, and he would give private interviews. He would talk to people for 15 or 20 minutes, I was his appointment secretary, so people would make an appointment through me, and then he would sit in his dome, and I would sit outside on the porch, and people would come. And I gradually realized that my job was to calm people down, just to calm them down, because they were about to have a face-to-face interview with a man that they felt had the capacity to see right into them and to know exactly who they were. And I mean, the woo-hoo like that just got really terrible. And I had to spend a little bit of time, once I figured out what my job was to help them to breathe so that they could go in there and keep their heads together while they talked to him. I said, you're walking around all the time and almost everybody that you see is judging you. Well, that outfit doesn't really go together, does it? I wonder what makes him think he can wear that shirt. Or why is that guy, putting himself forward as this kind of, just all the time. Isn't that so? We're just always, even if it's not really mean, we're always analyzing and we have these thoughts. And we just walk down the street all the time. We're not really panic-stricken. And I said with Swami Kriyananda, this is the only person you will ever meet who sees in you perfect divine light and nothing else, and is absolutely committed to bringing the very best out of you. This is the only time in your life when you will not be touched. And all of a sudden, this great anxiety will come over us. And we're just not used to it. We just don't think that way. Now, whether you've ever experienced that kind of love and acceptance from anyone, whether it's your own baby, your own mother, your friends, your spouse, if you're very, very lucky in life, you have somebody or somebodies who really just care about you. I have one friend, and our personalities do not match at all. And it's a very unlikely friendship on certain levels. But I finally had to realize what is the basis of this friendship. And I just had to say, perfectly honestly, this woman just loves me. And she just enjoys everything about me, even when I'm so awful. And she perceives how awful I am, and she gets this shocked expression on her face. How could you say that? There's just this wholehearted, I'm your sister, and it doesn't make any difference. Amazing how that affects us, isn't it so? Now, people nowadays are very, what is my purpose? What is my destiny? Why was I born? We're here to love each other. And really love each other. Not just be nice to the ones that we like. And not just be nice because you're nice. And as long as you're nice, I'll like you. And then, of course, when you're not nice anymore, of course, I won't like you anymore. But accept on a level like the Master's acceptance. Just looking, and that doesn't come just by affirmation. That has to be a change in your sense of reality. Let me speak about that for a moment. With Swami Kriyananda, who I knew very well for 40 years, I used to feel, I was always impressed by how impeccably he behaved, in the sense of his kindness and his generosity and his attunement with people and his appropriateness and so on. And I tried to emulate that behavior, and I would do better and worse. But often for me, it was a question of determining what I wanted to do and then directing myself to be able to do it. And success for me was to be able to do it. And I'll give you an example, but I gradually realized that something completely different was going on with him. I was 22 when I met Swamiji. He was 22 years older than me. And he always was 22 years older than me, as you can sort of figure that out. And he had been a disciple for a very long time already, and he was very well steeped in the spiritual path. I was unreasonably confident. I was a callow youth, I think is what you call it. One who is so ignorant they don't even know they're ignorant. But that never stopped me from expressing my opinions. I just felt a lot of confidence in my wrong opinions, and I would cheerfully put them forward. Swami Kriyananda was a master teacher, and he always encouraged. He asked my advice for 25 years, and for almost all that time I thought he actually needed it. confident. Well, in all those, then I got to be 44 and a bit beyond 44, and I started having friends who were 22 years younger than me, 25, 30, 40 years younger than me. And you have a little bit of experience in life, and you can get the impression that you know something. And people who have less experience than you can be strong in their point of view. And sometimes one wants to just say, "What do you know, twerp?" This is very, very tempting, but I prefer debate to conversation. It's one of my best arguments. You are a twerp. Okay, that's the end of the conversation. Not that anyone I know is, but the temptation is there. It's my temptation, it's not their reality. And it occurred to me when I grew old enough to have the situation reversed, that in all the 40 plus years I knew Swamiji, even when I was very young in experience and years, he never once mentioned my age or inexperience. Not once. Even though 35 years later, he quoted exactly, "You thwarted me a great deal," was his words. Just because I was so strong-minded, he wouldn't override me, but I just thwarted his intentions. So he'd have to just wait till I calmed down before he could go on. I offered him a global apology, which he accepted without any qualification, as if it was really owed. But anyway, so I'm thinking, wow, this is really something, considering the discrepancy between his consciousness and mine. So I went to him soon after, and the realization came. I said, "Swamiji, I just really want to thank you." I said, "In all these years, even though I know that I was behaving in ways that were not mature, you never mentioned my age or my lack of maturity, not once." And he accepted what I said, but I could tell by the look on his face that there was still a disconnect. "You never mentioned my age or my inexperience." And he just looked at me and he said, "I never noticed." Wow. He said, I never think of anyone in terms of their age. The soul is ageless. We've had many incarnations. We're young today, we're old tomorrow. And we're born at whatever state of consciousness we have. It doesn't have anything to do with the age that we're in. He said, "I never look at people's bodies. I just look into their eyes." And I realized that what for me was an affirmation of right attitude was for him an actual shift of consciousness. You see the difference? So self-realization is not like a dogma of how to behave properly. It's how to redefine what it is to be yourself. And redefine it by choosing to attune to a higher reality. In the same cycle of Swamiji's consciousness, there was a couple in our community that were very ill-suited for each other, and whatever the attraction of the heart was, it was not very well thought out. And after a period of time, their relationship disintegrated, and I was sitting at a dinner table with Swamiji and a few others, and we were talking about the fact that this marriage wasn't going to hold. And I commented that I had been shopping with the wife once for a birthday present for her husband, and I found a beautiful shirt of a bluish color. I said, "Oh, this would be wonderful. This is just the color of his eyes." His wife said, "Is it? What color are his eyes?" Wow. So I'm at the dinner table and I'm saying, "Well, she's married to him. She doesn't know what color his eyes are. This is no surprise that the marriage is not holding." And then again, Swami got that look on his face. And the woman sitting next to him was a woman named Seva. She had been his right hand for decades. Her salient feature is this gigantic, beautiful brown eyes. That's just who she was these brown eyes. He's sitting at the table. He said, "I don't know what color anybody's eyes are." And that was, he said again, "I don't look at their eyes, I look into their eyes. And I look at the spirit behind those eyes." And then he turns to Seva, with whom he's seen every day for, 15 or 20 years. He peers at her like this. "Oh," he says, "your eyes are brown." We're just opening the gate to a whole different level. We're just opening the sense of possibility to something quite different than just oh, let's just hang out and be nice to each other. What we're really talking about is the real potential for a real revolution. And think about what it would mean to really know yourself, not to be this tiny little vulnerable thing that's always afraid about being loved and getting old and not having enough money and maybe getting broken in some way or another, which we all think about in fear. But what if we could just see ourselves as a ray of the infinite, inhabiting this body, living in it? Swami Kriyananda about himself said, I never identify with Kriyananda. He said, I feel Kriyananda is an event for which I am responsible. Which I've always so enjoyed, because you are responsible for the event of your incarnation. It's not spiritual just to take a pass and not really participate. You see people who define their spirituality in extremely passive terms, and they don't have any attractive magnetism. They're not somebody you would want to be. The people who are engaged, fully engaged, but what you really want to be engaged with is, what am I going to be a channel for? What level of reality am I going to tune into? I had a moment, just a split second in my life. I was thinking about fear. I've always been a rather high-strung person. If I had a totem animal, it would probably be a squirrel. And I try not to drink very much caffeine, because as I always say to my friends, do you want me caffeinated? I mean, think about it. Generally, they'll give me the peppermint tea, just like no problem. So a little high-strung, less than I used to be, much less. But I was just thinking one day about fear and how this sort of subliminal level of anxiety walks around with all of us. Well, maybe I'm just speaking for myself. We don't even know exactly what we're anxious about, but we have this, we're not in charge, we can feel it. Many years ago, when I still lived in the rural community, and a lot of critters interacted with us. Our buildings were feeble and full of holes, and there were just lots of critters. We took down a picture on the wall once and discovered in the office building, and we discovered that there were a lot of bats who lived in the office building. Bats are like, it's this visceral kind of anxiety about bats, and the bats were just kind of loose in the office for a period of time. And I was writing at my desk, and this bat fell right there. And apparently this is what I did. I stood up, I got a cardboard box, I set the cardboard box over the bat, and then I screamed like a banshee. But somehow I managed to get it in there before I completely lost it. But this incident was a very small one. This was before computers, so I had a selectric typewriter, which was a very advanced thing to have in our time. Some of you are old enough to remember what an innovation the selectric typewriter was. And I'm sitting at my desk one day, and I should add that in those days, we didn't have cars. We just walked over the distance of our community. I lived a mile from the office. Every morning, I came up this hill and over this hill and down by the pond and then through the woods and then over this way and then into my office every day. Rain, shine, snow, whatever. So I made the usual trek, and I'm sitting in my office, and I take the cover off my typewriter, and there's this little tiny spider. Just this tiny little spider. But he had a big attitude. And whoever he was the top of his game. And he owned my typewriter. And he just moved from part to part of that. And he would get to the highest point of the return rod, and he would survey his whole kingdom, and then he would rush down and he would plant himself on the space bar, and he would look around. I was just enjoying him. Wow, you are a feisty little creature. And then I started thinking about power. And I realized, I started following him with my thumb, like this. And I realized that just at any moment, I could just go like that. And that whole feisty little incarnation could be wiped out. And I'm sitting here thinking like this, and all of a sudden I have this feeling. And there's this feeling of what I think of as Divine Mother. And I had feeling this Divine Mother, and I pictured myself walking to work, and she had her little thumb over me the whole way. And at any point, she could just snap my incarnation. And I was the same way. I was so important. But we all know that. That's where a little bit different. We all know that even though we're trying to be in charge, we're not really in charge. It's just happening in a way that we can barely understand. But imagine what power and freedom there would be to just be able to really surrender to it. Not be proud of ourselves because we were able to let go of some little part, but just really realize ourselves to be part of that infinite whole, and to realize that whatever is happening, we're always moving in the light of God, and we're always in the palm of God's hand. And I was just contemplating that, and I was walking up the stairs in my house, and just for a split second, it was like Divine Mother just said, okay, you want to know what that feels like? And she dropped it into my head. And for just a second, I was completely free of all fear. And this is the great word that I thought, wow. That's supposedly what Steve Jobs said just before he died. Wow. 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 The words just faded. But wow. What would that be like to live that way all the time? And this is what the Masters say to us. You are that powerful. All you have to do, and the Master put it so sweetly, is improve your knowing. We think we have to attain something. But actually, Swamiji said something that was really fascinating once. And this goes into, more metaphysics than I want to go into now, but you all know at least some of it. This world is vibrating. And we're always caught in this movement. Now I'm young, now I'm old, now I'm pretty, now I'm thin, now I'm fat, now I'm a man, now I'm a woman, now I'm alive, now I'm dead. Just all these different things happen. Morning, night, wealth, poverty, sickness, health. That's what it is. That's what this world is. It's constant change. Our error is that we get the part we like and we think that we're going to make it stay there. I was at the beach, which I'm sure many of you go to the beach here. The waves just keep coming in, don't they? And you can have as many opinions as you like. That's my favorite. Stay. This is the one I really like. You should stay. And it just rolls right up. And so we set our little lives out exactly as we want them. And they'll last a little while, but we just keep rolling because it's just the nature of this world, is this change. And the whole process of the spiritual path is that we move from the ever-shifting part into the still point of origin where all that movement begins. And think about it. If it's moving back and forth, the closer you are to the center. You know how on a merry-go-round, if you've ever been on merry-go-rounds, you get right in the center and the center doesn't seem to move. You move out from the center and you're spinning really hard, but the closer you come to the center, the less movement there is, the more still it is. That's what it is. We move closer and closer to the point of complete stillness within ourselves, and then the waves keep going. But our relationship to them is completely different. They become the event for which we are responsible. But our sense of self is somewhere else entirely. As Swamiji put it once, he said, and this is not an original statement, we think that the source of all this complexity of creation must be the most complex of all. He said, but in fact, what makes it complex is because it's always shifting. And the closer you get to that point of stillness, you see the simpler and simpler it becomes. This is why saints are very, very childlike in their enthusiasms. Swamiji had this capacity just to enjoy everything, no matter what it was. He just was always happy, because he was always happy. Because when we get to that point of stillness, and this is what all the scriptures tell us, and everyone who experiences it confirms, that center point is joy. That center point is actually Ananda, which is where the word Ananda comes from. It's joy is within you, right in the center. And so this project, this revolution of self-realization, is really the answer to the mess. It's a mess. This world is a mess. This is a stage in our planet in which things are changing really fast, and we're developing the technology to destroy ourselves, but not the moral fiber not to do it. And this is also a time on the planet where a great polarization there is this enormous upswing of spiritual understanding, and simultaneously the demons seem to be getting more and more powerful. Okay? And it's just so confusing to be living in both realities simultaneously. There's much scriptural commentary about how and why this happens, and let's just say this is the time that we chose to come in. And as I often say, it must have seemed like a good idea at the time. Right now, it seems like we could have made a wiser choice, but here we are. But we have, I don't believe we have the power to change the destiny of the whole. I think the magnitude of the dissonance has to play itself out. Also because things are so imbalanced that there just needs to be a kind of house cleaning. Now, does that mean famine, flood, earthquake, nuclear war? Who knows? When people in California were campaigning fiercely to ban nuclear bombs, which, any thinking person would think that's a good idea. They came to Swamiji and wanted him to throw the weight of Ananda behind their campaign. And they had this whole presentation. It was very well done. It was some city, some named city, Chicago, Washington, D.C., and this is the megaton bomb, the nuclear bomb. And so in the population center, this many tens of thousands of people will be vaporized. This many people will be turned to ash. This many people will die within 5 minutes. It was just this huge, ever-expanding circle of death. It was really real. So they present this whole thing so that we'll appreciate the seriousness of the issue. And Swami listens attentively. Then afterwards he says two things. The first thing he says, if your objective is peace, fear is not the right technique. Because what are we being channeled for? And then the second he said was more audacious. He said 100 years from now, almost nobody on this planet is still going to be here. He said whether we dribble off a few at a time over the next century, or whether we all go out together. He said once we're in the astral world, it doesn't make any difference. Once you're out of your body, you're just out of your body, and it just doesn't make any difference how it happens. Because we go in and out of our bodies over and over and over again. But what you take with you is your consciousness. And here on this planet at this time, we have a tremendous opportunity to be powerful instruments of right consciousness. And insofar as the sphere we live in is going to be defined by our consciousness, we will have tremendous influence. Whether we can actually save the whole planet or not, well, we might as well believe we can. What harm is there in believing that we can? Because at least we will try. But we will live or die, comfortable, uncomfortable. We will move ourselves closer to that center point. And the closer you are to that center point, the closer you are to standing in that reality of fearless peace and fearless joy. And just think about it for a moment. Isn't that a useful person to be with? I've always had this odd capacity. I'm very good with other people's crises. Somehow when they're in crises, I become exceedingly calm. I can become quite frantic about my own, but I'm extremely calm about other people's crises. And I'll be more specific than that. Because of my understanding of the spiritual path, I have a very different relationship to death than many people. And I have been present on a number of occasions when people have died. And wow, it's so marvelous to be able to bring a calm, fearless energy to any situation that everyone else is traveling. What do we want to be a channel for? That's what the path of self-realization is. Find out who I really am. Hold on to that reality and be an instrument of that reality for everyone. Become part of the nation of self-realization. And then we won't have to go through the security levels because everyone will know. This is my passport. This is who I am. I'm a child of the infinite. It's reputed that when President Reagan was in the White House and his daughter Maureen, I guess, was a yoga teacher in the area here, and she went to Lake Shrine. I don't know if this is true or not, and Brother Turiyananda was there, maybe you've heard this. And she introduced herself to Brother Turiyananda, the disciple of the Master. And she said, I'm Maureen, whatever her last name was. My father is President of the United States. Oh, he said, I'm Brother Turiyananda. My father is Lord of the Empire. That's what you want to speak. I may look just like this little tiny being playing a little part. I didn't actually leave any time for questions, but if you have anything you want to ask me, I'm not going anywhere. So, is there?
Yeah, there's time for.
Okay.
There's some time for questions. So,
I have this relationship to time. I'll tell you my time story. In the Bible, this is actually in the Acts of the Apostle. St. Paul was apparently quite a talker, and he had no sense of time. Apparently, he had this reputation. This is in the Bible. I'm not making this up. As Dave Barry says, I'm not making this up. This is really true. And he was speaking one night, and he was speaking on a second-floor room, and the windows were open. It was a very hot night, and the room was so full that many people were sitting on the window ledges of the second story. And he apparently just talked and talked and talked and talked, and somebody fell asleep, fell out the second story window, and died. Okay? So Paul had to go down, and he did. He resurrected him off the sidewalk like that. He talked him to death. So my philosophy is, you can't resurrect him, stop when you said you would stop.
we are on the second story. So we are stopping.
I have a couple of minutes. If anyone has anything more than I should.
Tell us about David and the founding of the Ananda Village.
Well, that's a hard question at 10 of 9. David is my husband, and he came to Ananda Village in 1979, and I came in 71. So he's considered an early member, but I'm considered a founding member. The founding of Ananda Village was the most fun I've ever had in my life, and believe me, I've had a lot of fun in my life. The first 10 years of Ananda were just like the astral world. We were with Swami Kriyananda. He was young. He was totally involved. We were absolutely penniless. The project was insane. We had no idea what we were doing. We lived on nothing. I ate, peanut butter and crackers and popcorn on a regular basis. That was about it. I got literally $50 a month and was paid for that. And Swami knew that we were building a worldwide organization that would be all over the world and would represent Master's teachings to tens of thousands of people. And I thought we were just out in the woods having a party. We had no television, we had no radio, we had no electricity, we had no running water, email hadn't been invented, we didn't have telephones. We lived completely by ourselves in a world of our own making. And it was all about devotion, it was all about freedom in a true sense, it was all about revolution. And Swami would tell us that all these things were going to happen, but actually, as he said, he stopped telling us because he said it frightened people when he talked about the vision that he saw. So we were just a crowd of young friends, mostly with beards and long hair and, just messy. And, but there was a magic. And I have to say, circumstances have changed. Now I live in Silicon Valley. I live in this rather nice house, and we have property across from Stanford, and we have this beautiful church, and we run a school, and do all the stuff. I travel around and visit Mom everywhere. But it's still the same revolution. And I lament to a large extent that it looks like something now. Because when it looked like nothing, you had to tune into it on a different level. Now it looks like something. So you might actually think that it is something. Which is a serious mistake. Because it is nothing but a group of individuals who sincerely and deeply want to expand their consciousnesses and are hanging together to help each other.
Yes.
And everything else is just because it's in the street, it's too noisy. We just need to be inside. It's not, you understand? And the moment it stops being that, I hope it dies. I hope it just vaporizes. The moment it stops being genuinely put forth to individuals who want to expand their consciousness and have a great time. That's all.
Okay, well, you're going all over the
I
place.
know, which is way too late.
How do you change your car?
How do you change your mind? I don't know. Everybody asks me a question, and I'm not going to accuse you, but I get asked this question. I get asked all over the world, and I get asked almost every class, and it always has a different flavor. It's always asked differently. But it is, what is the secret you're not telling me that's going to make this easier? Okay? And I say, do Kriya, become a disciple, go find your guru somewhere else, change your consciousness, be good. And they say, so, how do I do this? Because it's a long, sometimes quite boring, and kind of never-ending project. And you never get any time off. You never get to be nasty just for a little while. It's like every minute of every day, you have to ask yourself, what do I want to be a general for? And the more often you answer that as upwardly moving as you're capable of reaching. It just depends on where you're standing. There's always a forward direction. So Swamiji was marvelous at tuning into what you could do. Once in my own life, he'd given me a suggestion, which was very valid. And I knew it was a good idea, and I was simply incapable of doing it. And I went to him and I said, Swamiji, you asked me to do this, and I need to be sincere with you. I'm not doing it. And without taking another breath, he said, well, so much for theory, let's deal with reality. And then he came up with something I could actually do. Because wherever you're standing, there's always a step forward. And you may wish to take a 100-yard dash to the end of the race, which everybody wants somebody to tell them how to do it. But really, the problem is so annoying. The problem is just there. Yogananda said, take care of the minutes, and the incarnations will take care of themselves. Now, I find that very useful, because God realization, no more reincarnation, getting off the wheel of samsara, wow, that's a big assignment. It's too much for me, it makes me nervous. But, I'm about to say something really unkind, and I think I'll control my tongue and say something neutral. I can do that. And now I can actually say something nice. And then I can actually look at that person and see their positive qualities. Isn't that wonderful? And now when somebody says something really unkind to me, I just feel very compassionate toward them instead of angry. Like that. And then after a long time, you look behind you and you think, wow, I've come along. I've been on this path 45 years sounds like a long time. It only sounds like a long time from the front end, from this end. I don't know where time is. But I am impressed. I'm impressed by how different I am. And I really do not know how that happened. Because there was no big moment when I became somebody else. There really wasn't. There was just a whole lot of moments when I tried not to be too awful. And when I was too awful, I tried to make reparation for being so awful and then go forward again. But if you just keep doing that, you'll suddenly discover there's as I said the other day, there's a trail of glory behind you. Yes.
Is there some desires of Swami Dayananda that hasn't been flourished or something?
You mean for not personal, but ideas
Just
about
ideas, yeah.
about 100 million? I mean, seriously, he generations are going to be working for what he started. Even the people who are closest to him can hardly remember. He was a world changer, and he himself. I'll tell you this last story, and then I'm going to stop. Swamiji never paid any attention to popular culture, and when Michael Jackson was absolutely at the height before his fall, when he was at the height of his popularity, some of the teenagers in our community found out that Swami Kriyananda not only did not know who he was, but had never heard his music. And they thought this was just a travesty. So they picked out some of the best cuts and they sent their record to Swami or the recording, and he was very dutifully, he listened to it. And Swami is so honest, I love this. He listened to it. First thing he remarked was the man, he said, is a consummate artist. He knows exactly what he wants to say, and he says it perfectly. That was his comment about it. He recognized a genius when he saw him. The second thing he said is that his vibration is exactly the vibration of the planet at this time, which is why he was such a worldwide phenomenon. He spoke the language everybody was speaking, and they recognized it and embraced him as their own. And then Swami Kriyananda said, and I realized that I am completely out of tune with the vibration of this planet. I do not relate to it at all. He said, I'm creating something for the future. And what I've seen that Swami Kriyananda has done, he has created an entire culture for people who feel that self-realization is their primary interest in life. I mean, relationships, art, money, raising children, everything, getting along with other people, health, it's all there. He wrote 150 books. It's all there. Very few people, if I may be quite crude, give a damn right now. They're not interested, but they will be. And when the vibration of the planet gets closer to the vibration that he was living on, they will look around and they will see that it's all laid out in front of them. And he said, in many ways, and we'll see that Ananda communities themselves will also have that same motive. When the society becomes more unstable than it is now and people are looking for solutions, they will look at the cooperative communities and they will say, oh, that's the one, that's the one. We'll see. I don't walk around this. But that's what I said. A lot of what has been forgotten, I have written down in 5 file cabinets. And God willing, in the next few years, I'll write a book that'll have a lot of it. Nobody could write everything. But I can at least preserve a lot of what is not being present. So, that's it. I can't resurrect this, I won't let you. But I'm here, and I'm happy to continue.
Thank you very much.